Farlost, created by John Miro.
40. "Don't know why you let us out of that tin can just to stuff us back in," Doc Sanders growled. The large man handed a square plastic box to a nurse, who turned and escorted two crewmen, both with metal emergency cast-on arms, out the door on their way back to Cellar 1. Arnel Villanueva stood near the door and watched, as Sanders scratched his short gray and black hair and floated, seemingly aimlessly, in a circle. All that were left in the med section were himself, Sanders, and Taggart, Pruitt floating just outside the door, and Burkov in another bed further down, waiting to be seen by the doctor. Arnel reached inside his spacesuit and scratched where the collar ring sat on his shoulder blade, watching the older man stare blankly as he hovered there. Dr. Forrest Sanders sometimes seemed unfocused, almost doddering, but Arnel knew better. He had a long history working in space, and was credited with the creation of several life-saving zero-G procedures. Sanders was almost unflappable and never doddering. Sure enough, a moment later he pushed off the wall by the bed where Taggart lay, loosely strapped down for testing, and nimbly grabbed onto handholds at a wall full of small doors and dispensers. "You know why as well as I do, Doc," Arnel said, craning his neck to check on Burkov, where the man sat at the other bed. He had one leg stuck under a strap and a screen on a swing arm pulled close and lighting his twitching face. Burkov was on the line with Cellar 2. Arnel guessed the nervous wreck was checking in with Chairman Goss, catching up the closest thing to a ruler Hascom Corporation had on the events of the very eventful past day. Burkov was whispering harshly, his eyes flicked over to Arnel, then quickly away. The man leaned in closer to the monitor. Arnel turned back to Sanders. "The cellars are reinforced against radiation, structural damage, and have enough water and supplies to last for days in the event of an emergency. I think docking with another ship at a faster speed than has ever been attempted, then holding on while said ship uses our reactors to travel even faster counts as an emergency." Doc Sanders snorted. "I'm sure that makes the folks in Cellar 2 feel better." He grabbed tools of his trade and returned to Taggart's bedside, flicking a bright light between the security officer's eyes. Taggart jerked away in surprise, and the doctor slapped a hand to his forehead to hold the eyes open. "Settle down," he grumbled. Arnel closed his eyes and took a breath. The doctor wasn't sniping at either of them, he knew. He and Taggart were just the closest suitable targets. Sanders shoved the eye scope back in a pocket and felt around Taggart's head and neck. "No obvious contusions?" He met Taggart's eyes. "So what number am I thinking of, Kreskin?" Arnel could see Taggart's jaw clench from meters away. The man said nothing. "I understand your frustrations, Doctor," Arnel said. "All of us would like to have more control, or any margin of error for what's coming," he thought, "but we don't, so we do what we can do, which is—" "Get back in the sardine can," the doctor said. He patted Taggart on the head. "You seem fine on the outside." "Gee, thanks, Doc," Taggart said. Sardine can was an apt description, Arnel thought silently. The crew trapped inside Cellar 2 had expected the radiation storm HHL-6 had been flying through at the beginning of this odyssey. They had not expected to cross through an unmapped cloud of micrometeorites, which had squeezed the frame around the airlock and left them trapped inside, while the world around them went through the meat grinder. All the same, Arnel thought something else might be responsible for the doctor's anger. "Dina's in constant contact," he said quietly. "Her vitals are stable. She's reached her destination and has enough fuel to match our orbit and—" "And try to grab hold as we scream by?" Sanders shouted. Arnel said nothing, nor did Taggart. Burkov didn't appear to notice. The doctor took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Officer Villanueva." "Please," he offered back. "Arnel." Sanders lifted one eyebrow. "Never took you for a first-name man." Arnel shrugged. "Things change." "Hey, Doc," Taggart called, impatiently but respectfully from his bed. "I got things to do. You wanna—" He made a hurry-up gesture with his hands. Arnel winced. Forrest glared. "Oh, in a hurry, are we?" He pulled something on the chair and lifted Ron Taggart and the top of the bed loose. Ron yelped once as the older man deftly floated Taggart and the frame across to a circular device mounted from what blueprints called the ceiling. "Let's shoot some hoops, then." The doctor dramatically stuck his tongue out in mock concentration and pushed, releasing Taggart and the top of the hospital bed, now little more than a stretcher. It flung with perfect aim towards the metal circle. "Doc!" Taggart yelled, a little more high-pitched than usual. Humming to himself, Sanders kicked off and beat the helplessly strapped-down Taggart to his destination and ensured the security officer slipped harmlessly through the center, where he clicked the bed into place. He patted Taggart on the shoulder as he tapped a console on the side of the circle. "Remember, the MRI likes to suck metal right out of people. No bullets in you from your gangbanger days, my man." "Your skin's too dark for asshole assumptions," Taggart growled. "Might still be a fragment in my right shoulder from one of my desert vacations, though." Doc Sanders gave Taggart a skeptical glance. "Right, you were military. And how's that different from a gang?" he asked. He didn't wait for an answer, but tapped a button and kicked back toward Arnell as the machine began to whine. "We'll know soon enough." "You son of a—" Taggart began to shout. "You're the one was in a hurry," Sanders called out cheerfully as he grabbed a handhold near Arnell. Arnell looked at him quizzically. "You'll be fine," Sanders assured him in a near whisper. "X-ray shows there's probably nothing left. Whoever operated was thorough." Arnell pondered the probably and how much pressure everyone was under today. What the hell, he thought. He's in a better mood after blowing off a little steam at Taggart's expense. "I understand we're planning to break speed records?" the doctor asked. "I hear Beecham is scurrying around setting up sensors." "Yeah?" Arnell chuckled, staring over his shoulder at the MRI thumping all around Taggart. He turned his brain back to the doc's question. He, too, was still amazed about damn near everything around him. In the few moments, he wasn't outright terrified. "That is, if we're lucky. If we're not quite lucky enough, a lot of HHL-6 is going to be exposed to vacuum, or torn right away. Best place for the crew with HHL underthrust is the emergency tanks." The fight seemed to go out of Sanders' face, but he nodded. "The last of the crew is cleared or triaged. My nurses and the final patients are en route." The MRI chimed and wound down. "And Taggart is fine on the inside, too." He raised his voice. "Might need a shrink, though." "Thanks, Doc," Taggart ground out, and Arnell heard the skitch of adhesive straps being pulled loose. A sharp sound from the monitor, where Burkov was sitting, drew both their attention. Burkov was shaking his head violently, and Goss was yelling something indecipherable. "Now, Burkov, he really does need a shrink," Sanders confided. "He's beyond traumatized. He's manic and having difficulty accepting." Sanders waved his hands in the air around them, then kicked back off the wall to gather last supplies. "Noted," Arnell said with another look at Burkov. "Pruitt." The serious-faced blonde security officer appeared in the door. "Please escort Vice President Burkov to Cellar 1. He pitched his voice low. "Watch close, and have the duty officer arrange for restraints until we stand down from emergency conditions." "Sir," Pruitt said. He snapped off the next best thing to a salute with a curt bob of his chin, and then coasted across to Burkov. "You want to clear out, then? Guess I better close up and get back to my window seat," Sanders said. Arnell examined the man. He looked hollowed out, exhausted, but there was a fierceness in his gaze, and all that rough fun he'd had with Taggart. He could hold his own when the wind blew crazy, Arnell decided. "That's all. Thanks, Doc." Sanders gave an absent wave over his shoulder, focused on his packing. A beep sounded in Arnell's earpiece, then Montaigne's voice filled the comm unit piped in from his spacesuit. "Keep this to yourself first. You're on with me and Captain Travis. We're moving up the timetable to dock." "Can we do that?" Arnell asked. "I thought we only had one shot." "We do," Travis interrupted. This was not the same calm, considered man Arnell had talked to before. There was a new tightness and urgency to his words. "One chance to dock and shake loose of the Thorn's gravity, but now we gotta do it faster." Montaigne cut in again. I'm ordering Pilot Nishioka's EVA craft and his mechs to lay anchors on our hull and fly into the Betty's cargo bays with guide wires. Assuming they survive the procedure, Travis assures us they can pull us in faster by those wires. Travis shouted over her, "We've got boarding parties inbound." Arnell turned towards a wall. "Boarding?" he hissed. "How? At the speeds we're already pulling." Travis again. "They're coming in torpedoes. The insides are filled with a barely compressible liquid medium. They've got massive shields on their ass, lets them surf on thermonuclear pellets. They'll get here fast, less than 90 minutes. They'll break hard and use the explosion to disorient our efforts without destroying the assets, our ships. Then board and take control before we can dock, slingshot around the Thorn and outpace their mothership." Arnell grabbed a handhold and floated there. He was deep into terrified territory again. "Sir?" Taggart asked over his shoulder. Arnell waved him to be silent. "Humans aren't rare out here," Captain Travis said hoarsely. "Your ship and your supplies are. What the hell can live in a liquid environment and survive getting slammed around by nukes?" Arnell swallowed, gears grinding to find a way to be helpful, to decide what to ask next. "What's coming?" His knuckles turned white around the handhold, as Captain Travis told him, pouring a nightmare into his ears. Sanders wandered over, oblivious to the voices in Villanueva's ear. "You still here? I told you Taggart's in great shape. Low cholesterol even." He turned and shouted at Taggart. "Young enough to feel immortal." Villanueva clumsily grabbed the doctor's shoulder and leaned in. "Things have changed." Taggart had already swam over, his eyes hard, awaiting commands. All the levity and gentleness he'd shown as he and Sanders quipped, gone. Sanders dropped his relaxed attitude, but didn't panic. He showed his steel when he reached out and grabbed Arnell's elbow, helping Arnell stop his body's accidental spin. "What are we looking at?" the doctor asked, his voice quiet too. Arnell squeezed the man's shoulders, grateful for the doctor's reaction. "Pack field dressings, trauma kits, extra blood, whatever else you think you'll need for large-scale triage." He flipped a gaze over his shoulder at Burkov. The broken vice president was huddling close to the monitor, face wet with tears and absorbed by Goss's angry stare. Pruitt watched over him. The doctor understood perfectly. The fierceness was back. Wordless, accepting what was to come, he spun back to the wall to collect what was needed now. Arnell admired him as he swam against a deep, dark current that threatened to pull him under. So much had happened, so fast, and now more was coming. Taggart was close now, his voice low, panic held in check. "What the hell's coming first?" "Yes, it is," Arnell said, fighting to keep control. "Hell's coming."
Farlost. Music by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Learn more at servingworlds.com.
Hi, John Miro here. Farlost is brought to you by my backers at Patreon. Patronage starts at $1 a month, or about 25 cents a cliffhanger. Patreon.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.